And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guest, Brad Lail. Brad has done some research into the 33rd parallel. Some of the things he talked about, some of the connections he makes really piqued my interest. So I'm definitely anxious to get him on here to talk a little bit more about all that. But before we bring Brad on, if you've ever had an experience and you would like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, there's 2 things you can do. You can send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Either way works for me. Make sure to get your message sent to me and we'll get something scheduled for a future episode. If you want to help the podcast, please share it around. No matter what your listening preference is, if you listen to it on Apple or Spotify or on YouTube or wherever you find Tinfoil Tales, sharing it around helps bring awareness to the show, finds new listeners. With new listeners, a potentially new guest. So for everyone out there that's sharing the podcast, just know I appreciate it. If you would like to leave a 5-star rating and review, that helps out with my rankings, makes the podcast more discoverable. So that does really help. If you're interested in joining the Patreon, there is a free tier and the paid tier. Either tier will give you access to Crinkled Conspiracies, the new weekly episodic podcast that I'm doing with my friend Ed Corella. We dive into current events, conspiracies of what's going on, trying to keep up to date on that. It's available exclusively on the Patreon, or if you're listening on Spreaker, you can support the podcast that way too. And if you're a supporter of Tinfoil Tales on Spreaker, you get access to Crinkled Conspiracies. The paid tier is only $1.99 a month on Patreon. You get access to all the episodes right after they're recorded. They're all ad-free. You get Crinkled Conspiracies, you get the live videos, and other things that I've still got in the works. There is the merch store. You can find some Tinfoil Tales shirts and stickers on there. Also, make sure to follow me around on all the social medias. Look for Brandon Tinfoil Tales on Facebook, Tinfoil Tales Podcast on Instagram. You can reach out to me that way if that's how you prefer to get a hold of me. I will be appearing at 4 different events as of right now, scheduled for the fall. I'll have a vendor booth set up at every event and a couple of events I'll be speaking at. The first is Bigfoots and Brews and Spirits 2 on September 14th at Dowagiac, Michigan at the Sister Lakes Brewing Company. On September 27th and 28th, I'll be at the first annual Indiana Bigfoot Conference down in Nashville, Indiana. On October 19th, I will be at ParaUnity 6 in Miami County, Indiana at the 4-H County Fairgrounds. And on October 26th, I'll be in Crawfordsville, Indiana for the first annual Crawfordsville Paranormal Convention. The 2 events in October are free to the public. All ages are welcome. The 2 Bigfoot events do require tickets, and there will be links for that in the show notes for anyone that's interested. But again, come on out. Stop by my booth. I'll have some stuff for you. I'll have my recording rig, so if you have an experience you want to share, you can sit down with me and we'll get that recorded. But now, we're going to go ahead and bring Brad on. I only heard a little bit about some of the stuff that Brad was talking about, but it really piqued my interest, and I didn't want to listen too much into it, so I kind of stopped and reached out to him to get him on here. So I've been definitely looking forward to talking with him. I hope you guys enjoy the episode. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take the time to welcome my guest tonight, Brad Lail. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, dude? How you doing?
Pretty good. You want to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, man. My name is Brad Lail. I am the host of a podcast called The Awakened Podcast, where I talk about all things spirituality, conspiracy, truth, hidden history, near-death experiences, psychedelic experiences, anything you want to talk about that's a little woo-woo and beyond the veil, I'm all into. So like I have I like to talk to people who've had strange encounters with demonic entities or cryptid sightings, or again, some of my topics will jump from that to crystals, and the healing
Hmm.
properties and the vibrations of crystals. So I'm really into energy, frequency, vibrations. That's a topic that I really like to talk about a lot because of it's everything. It's what the universe is made of. So that's one area that I want to explore more that I don't feel like I have a strong grip on. So I'm going to be having a lot more of those conversations in the near future. And also, it's not always serious. It's not always going to be serious. I have a guy on that's coming on the show soon that makes Hollywood connections and stuff like that. I like to tie it into my favorite topic, the 33rd parallel, but I like to have fun guests on too. So it's not always serious stuff. It's not always scientific. It's not always cryptid stuff. It's a little bit of everything. So, but yeah, I'm into everything beyond the veil. And you can find my podcast at theawakenedpodcast.com.
Awesome. For anyone listening, I definitely recommend checking it out. Very similar type of, I don't want to say show, but like generally, like I do the same kind of thing. Like my episodes, I'm always interviewing people that had either spirituality stuff, they've had obviously cryptid encounters, alien encounters, like anything strange has always piqued my interest. So that's why I found you, because you were on another podcast and I seen the 33rd parallel and I listened to a little bit and it really piqued my interest. I was like, all right, I'm not going to listen to the whole episode because I want to have him on my show to talk to me about it because it sounds very interesting. And
Yeah, man.
I don't know a whole lot about it because, like I said, I only listen to little bits and pieces, but I did do a little Googling during my live stream about a couple weeks ago. And we talked about, I mentioned that you're going to come on here. I had a guy come on talk about the 33rd parallel, and we looked up and like we seen that like I think it was Nagasaki was on the 33rd parallel, and like Dallas was, and it just kind of goes on like in towards the Middle East. Like, yeah, there's a lot of weird shit that goes on this parallel. So definitely want to
I,
have you on here to talk about it. But I'm good to talk about anything else you want to talk about too, because I know we mentioned before we started recording, there's some things you haven't actually been able to dive into. So whatever it is you want to talk about, it's completely your show at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I like to talk about the 33rd parallel because it talks about something that it's a unexplored, not unexplored, I shouldn't say that, but it's well, first of all, the 33rd parallel, if you try to Google it, you're not going to find much information. There's been a lot of things that's been purged from the internet, as m many people know. You can't really find any good sources anymore, which is unfortunate for the people who are doing that, because I think what they're doing is they've created a network of people like us who actually go who not only talk to each other and spread the message in a much bigger way now, but we are out there actually exploring and searching for things in our own backyard that
Someone,
are
not to interrupt, but someone said use DuckDuckGo. I've never actually tried it.
well, yeah. So DuckDuckGo, I'm glad you brought that up because I do web design and marketing and search engine optimization and things for a living. And, you know, there, so basically Google uses or DuckDuckGo used to use Google's search engine. They used to pay to use Google's search engine. So it didn't matter if you used DuckDuckGo, you were still using
Still
you
using
know,
Google.
yeah, you're still using Google. Now, I think DuckDuckGo recently got away from that, but did they create their own, or did they, buy into another one like Yahoo or something? But a lot of them do that. I think, matter of fact, Yahoo, I believe, I could be wrong, uses like the Bing one or something like that. They all kind of are connected. And you'll notice that if you search on Google and you click a link, it'll leave it purple, it turn it purple, right?
Hmm.
Well, you used to be able to go to DuckDuckGo and do that same search, and it would pop up the purple link on DuckDuckGo. So that was a dead giveaway there, that they were using the same algorithms basically. They might have had less filters, which are basically if this then that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's pretty much the algorithm. If somebody searches this, then pull up that. So and
Yeah.
and so they weren't doing anything original. They were just using other software. Now again, I think they probably got a lot of criticism for that. I think they might have gone away from that, but it seems to be that Yandex might be the, which is like a Russian, you know, search engine, but it seems to be like these, there used to be a one called Dogpile. I don't know if that still exists anymore, but there's a lot of like, obscure ones that you could probably use that can probably still get some good information out there, or you can find some good information on. But unfortunately, like I said, it's a monopoly, man. You can't, I mean, you know, I hook my clients up to Bing all the time and all these other search engines because you can set people's websites up to be indexed by different web crawlers. And the only one that really matters, unfortunately, is Google. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like you have no choice almost. So it sucks, but yeah, man. But like I said, I'm into the 33rd parallel because it's energetic ley lines that cross that cross the world. You just mentioned a couple places in the Middle East, and yeah, it not only crosses the Middle East, it crosses the hot spots in the Middle East.
Mhm.
It crosses Kabul, Afghanistan. It crosses Israel, Temple Mount. It crosses Damascus, Syria, where they had all the war going on a few years ago. It crosses Baghdad, Iraq. I mean, it's literally, we're talking about 80 miles wide of a section of the world that's 80 miles wide that goes around the globe. So it's pretty important for people to understand the context of that. I mean, that's a small window. Now, it's also a warm part of the world, because it's close to the equator. So you're gonna get there's a lot more people living in that zone. So of course there's gonna be weirder things that happen. There's gonna be more wars and stuff, but the coincidences that happen on the 33rd parallel can't be coincidences. At some point you just go, okay, now it's just too much. Now it's just like once you start learning about some of this stuff, which I'll get into, it's like there's no coincidence. There has to be no coincidences in some of these places. Like for example, Mount Hermon is on the 33rd parallel, and that's where famously the Book of Enoch says that the fallen angels fell to earth, right? So the 33% of fallen angels fell to earth, and that's also the same place that Jesus had his transfiguration, where he became luminous, and turned into like a ball of light. So, but that place, right, that Mount Hermon, at the top of Mount Hermon is a NATO base, if that tells you anything. So
Hmm.
there's always some kind of military connection. There's always some kind of, like on the 33rd parallel in the United States, for example, I can't even remember how many military bases that go along on the 33rd. It's either on the 33rd or like right beside it because, there's a lot of high strangeness that a lot of people who in your audience and a lot of stuff happens in the national forests, and all these bases are, all these national forests, first of all, are on the 33rd, and they're not only national forests but also wildlife refuges, or wildlife refuges. All these like big satellites, big telescopes, all these major things NASA and stuff has like on the 33rd parallel as well. So there's a pretty important connection to make there. And like I said, military bases are always near the national forest. So anytime something happens, a lot of times people who had UFO sightings or something will say that, military jets come in and chase these things away, that kind of stuff. So like there's something going on that somebody knows about that they're not telling the rest of the world about. So and these national forests, obviously, Teddy Roosevelt protected in the late 1800s, or was it late 1800s and early 1800s? I can't remember. But then, his cousin FDR kind of started the New World Order regime that started in 1933.
That
So
number
yeah, man.
seems to pop up quite a bit. And
Yeah.
we were, I have a friend who I kind of poke fun at that Jim Carrey movie, the number 23, but he is always about the number 17. And then I heard the 33rd parallel and I was like, what is it with these random numbers? And then people make the connections with it. And there's all sorts of stuff. Like even with the number 17 for him, like if you watch movies, like that number pops up quite a bit and just random stuff. Like you see 17, he always sends me stuff about it. So I'm just like, that's strange. But
Yeah, and also too, I think that I want people to understand too. Like I don't always make a connection with the number 33. It's just, and it's sometimes like, my wife has a white sedan. So anytime we see white sedans like
You
hers,
see
I'm
it.
like, oh, you start seeing it more
Mm-hmm.
often.
Yeah,
Um,
I know what you mean.
so I don't know if it's, a lot of people can go, well, he's just trying to make connections with that. But once you get into it, it's a little more complex than that. Like I see angel numbers all over the place, which are like, to me, they're spirit guides that guide me through the world that anytime I get a message, anytime I feel like I don't necessarily look for messages, but sometimes they're there. They make their presence known, and they'll do so through the form of numbers in some way, and that's usually through conversations with people. I'll have a conversation with somebody, and I'll start talking about angel numbers, and they'll go, "Hey, man, this is crazy, but look at this," and they'll show me like a tattoo, and it'll say like 222 or 444 on there or something, which are angel numbers. And I said, "What do you think that is?" And he goes, "That's my angels." And I said, that's exactly that's my point, man, is everybody who sees these numbers know exactly what it is without, physically seeing angels. And God talks to everybody in different ways, you know what I mean? So, my older brother sees butterflies a lot, certain color butterflies. So what it is basically is a message. It's like you're on the right path, you're doing the right thing. Like my dad died in February 2023, and I was just getting angel numbers. I mean, just it was unreal. I mean, I was getting, and I was seeing it everywhere, man. And I initially kept saying to my mom and everybody, "Hey, don't worry, Daddy's gonna be okay," because I keep getting these angel numbers. But then my dad died, and then I immediately had the thought, oh, maybe they were just trying to let me know that I'll be okay, And then, I know a lot of people can look at that and go, well, that's just you hoping for something. And I think it's bigger than that. If you open yourself up to the universe, you start to receive messages from the universe. You know what I mean? And the universe in my mind is God. So, um, and those come in the form of what I call angel numbers, because I really do believe we have spirit guides that guide us through this world. So. But yeah, so I get it, man. I understand that maybe you're looking into things too much. But even for somebody like my wife, who's such a big skeptic, she doesn't listen to anything I talk about, by the way. She could care less about any of this stuff, but
I
as
think that's
most,
I think that's a wife thing.
yeah. Well, she's also kind of locked into how she is, right? She like to her faith. She's doesn't want her faith shaken about anything. So anything that takes her off that course is a problem. So she doesn't want to hear anything, but even she's starting to go, okay, these signs are pretty crazy now because I'm starting to get them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, for example, like a synchronicity is what I call these kinds of things. But my dog Penny died. We had Penny for like 16 years, me and my wife. And when she died, the night that she died, my wife, it was really my wife's dog because she got her when I was in Iraq, when I was deployed to Iraq. So it was really my wife's dog. So she was really torn up about it. We both were, but she was especially torn up. And my wife was reading a Stephen King book later on that night. I can't remember what the name of the book was, but there was a sentence in there that said Penny was such a good dog or something along those lines. And it's like, that's a weird message to get in a
Yeah.
Stephen King book the day that your dog dies. You know what I mean? So like my wife starts to see, okay, this is kind of weird. What's going on? And, it's almost like she thinks, are you into some kind of like weird witchcraft or something? She
Yeah.
doesn't think that, but she's always like, be careful with this or be careful with that. And it's like, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I feel like I'm being used by God to talk about certain things. That's really what it boils down to. So, um, and again, I don't mean to get too spiritual on people because I don't want people to turn out, or turn the radio off or turn the podcast off. But, it to me, it really is a spiritual battle that we're going through in this world right now. And I think the veil is becoming more thin. And so I think that, God is trying to use people to kind of help wake people up, and which is the genesis of my show, the Awakened Podcast, because I kind of awoke, I guess you could say, I had an awakening moment, a bunch of awakening moments that kind of led me down this path from, everybody goes from conspiracy to paranormal to spirituality usually. Um, but for me, man, it was, once I started seeing the world for as it is, I just started going, okay, something bigger is going on than what we know about. And, I don't like being lied to. I don't like being treated like an idiot. I want to know what's going on. So,
Right.
yeah, some people don't want to hear it, man. My wife was one of them. That's all I was trying to say. So, I get it, you know.
Yeah.
It's a little woo-woo for some people, but I got to the point, man, where I was like into everything paranormal, you know, and it was like I still am into everything paranormal because I think you know, every little bit of information can help us get to understand what's going on, where are these things coming from, and who are they, and how come we can't see them all the time? How can they affect our electronics, and how can they, you know, why do they stink when they come in? You know, like there's all kind of questions I have. But I haven't gotten past the paranormal stuff. It's just for me, it's like I already know. Okay, yeah, I get it. Things out there that they're beyond me exist for sure. You know, and that's the whole point of what I was trying to say is, you know, paranormal things are real. Dogman's real. Bigfoot's real. You can tell me any story. Nothing surprises me anymore. You know, and I 100% believe it because I don't think people just make up stories just to lie, you know. So
No.
I 100% believe it. For me, I've gone on to go, okay, so what is it? Where are they coming from? And that's where like I was saying earlier, I kind of started to, you know, peel back the onion on the scientific. If you look into the scientific part of it, you start to see, okay, some of this stuff makes sense if you look at it from a scientific point of view. And it's one thing that they don't talk about a lot in school, and you know, they're not going to teach you about because if they taught everybody the, you know, for like I talk a lot about the electromagnetic spectrum and how we're visible light. We're in the electromagnetic spectrum, you know, we're visible light, and what you can't see to the left of the electromagnetic spectrum is, you know, infrared, radio waves, and microwaves, right? And on the
Hmm.
right is, so on the left is all slow vibration, super slow vibration, low energy, dark, cold. You know, anything that's cold is low vibration because everything vibrates in this world. At the subatomic level, there are quarks, and these quarks require heat to vibrate. And when they vibrate, they give off a frequency. And so that frequency, the faster or slower a frequency is, the hotter or colder it'll be. And that, so if we can't see it, then it's so cold that we can't see it, right? It's like in the cryogenic phase of things. It's cold, it's dark, we can't see it. That's again, that's where radio waves exist, that's where microwaves exist, and that's where infrared exists. So if you go to the right side of it, you have you know, gamma rays, ultraviolet rays, and X-rays. And what are they? They're always hot, right? They're always super radiated. Um, you know, and and to me, the left side is demons, and the right side is where the UFOs are coming from. And actually, if you turn the electromagnetic spectrum upside down, it looks more like angels and demons, right? But I'm not saying that the UFOs are angel. I actually think that there's some form of just different dimensional beings that want to be here because it's too hot where they're at, right? They want to be in the warm zone, where we're in the perfect zone, in God's light where we are. They want to be in the visible light. They want to be in the spectrum, in the visible spectrum. So, and the same with the demons. You know, they want to attach themselves to people who are typically low vibrating people, people who are in fear, because fear vibrates at 4 hertz. Love vibrates at 528 hertz, right? So if you're vibrating in fear all the time, it's easy for demons to attach themselves to you. Because remember, they want to get the hell out of hell because it's they hate us because we live in a perfect, you know, we are creators in a perfect world. In their mind, it's perfect, it's warm, it's, you know, it's bright, it's, I mean, imagine being in hell, right? It's dark and cold and all this other stuff. And imagine being too hot and you're trying to, you know, abduct people and populate your race on this, in this visible spectrum that we live in. So I don't, again, I'm not saying UFOs are aliens, I mean angels, but I am saying that they are in a different dimension and they are trying to get to where we are.
You
So
mentioned hell being dark and cold and everything. That's almost like the opposite of the depictions that everyone thinks of hell because you think of the lake of fire, you're burning and everything else that gets told to you. So it's kind of a different perspective I haven't heard before is like being dark and cold and everything else when you think of hell, because again, that's what I've always heard is like the lake of fire. You're going to get cast in the lake of fire, burning up in hell. Just a little
well, I
different.
mean, have you ever, you know, had a freezer burn? I mean,
Yeah.
it burns. So it's, you know, I think it's just a misinterpretation. But if you look at it from a literal point, I mean, there were some, I can't remember the name of the infrared goggles that they were using in Vietnam, but they made these infrared goggles and the troops put them on and then they could see like demons flying in the sky. And they immediately had to like send them all back because they thought people were hallucinating. But what they were doing is they were actually seeing in the infrared. They were actually seeing the demons that are flying around us that they couldn't see before. These things exist all around us, but we can't see them because again, we vibrate at a higher level than the demons, but we vibrate at a lower level than the aliens or whatever you want to call them. So but in my opinion, man, we're coming from if you look at the earth, right? There's in the Bible it talks about a firmament. So I know a lot of flat earthers like to talk about the firmament, and I agree with it. To me, the firmament is a prism. And if you look at God's light as the sun, I don't know if you know how a prism works, but it has this light that has to shine through a little slit
Mm-hmm.
in order to spread the rainbow of colors out, right?
Yep.
And so if you look at the sun, basically light has to be shot through a slit and then shot through a glass or something that can refract the light, something that can bend the light and spread it out. So my opinion is that the sun is shining through the prism of the firmament into this reality that we live in, right? It's like a projector almost. That's kind of how I look at the sun. It's like a projector projecting something from somewhere else. There's a light coming through a little small hole, which is the sun, right? And then it kind of beams into the light that we see. So essentially, I think that if we are made in God's image, which the Bible says 1,000 times, and it also says 1,000 times that we, are made or God is light. So if God is light and we're made in God's image, then that means that we're light, right? We're light beings. And so my theory on it kind of makes sense to me, of course, but and I've heard other people go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you think of it in the terms of, because like a lot of times people who are religious don't want to look at the scientific aspect of it, because unfortunately, science has been hijacked by fundamentalists. Like, I mean, these not fundamentalists, but like people who are just crazy. They believe in science. That's their religion. They don't have a God. That science is their religion. And so it's been kind of a hijacked thing, but science and God are the same thing to me. You can't have science without God. So it's kind of hard to have that conversation with people because again, you can't really have it with people who are flat earthers because they call you a globetard, like we talked
Yeah.
about earlier. But it's like, I just believe in we're in something for sure that is probably is probably much bigger than we can wrap our minds around, And so I try my best to break it down how I see it, more or less. I don't really get into who's right about this or who's right about religion or who. What I feel like is like there's good and there's bad, there's dark and there's light. And if you're not part of the light, then you're part of the dark. So I don't care what you call that. I don't care if you call it God or whatever. For me, it's God and it's Christ. But as long as you live in the light and you love others and take care of others, I don't care what you call it. Right.
Yeah.
So
I
so
feel like if
anyways,
you're a good person and do good things,
yeah.
I do. To get back on the 33rd parallel, but you mentioned flat Earth and everything else. Where does NASA happen to fall on the parallel scale? Like,
I don't I
is
think
Houston? I know they launched the rocket. Is Houston on the 33rd parallel, or is that too south?
I think it's a little south. But I think NASA had a headquarters in Birmingham for a while and then it moved up to Huntsville.
Hmm.
But if you go again, if you stay on the 33rd and you go across the United States, I mean you're gonna cross like where the Lucifer telescope is, which is, and I try to explain this to people sometimes. It's basically telescopes are reverse prisms. Okay, they have these things called spectrographs in them that are reverse prisms. So if there's a prism shining light on us, they have to reverse that prism in order to see into space. So I look at it as, you know, and by the way, they have to cryogenically lower the temperature of a telescope just to be able to see into this realm that I was just talking about, right? This darker realm that nobody can see into because there's no light there. It's dark, it's cold. So it makes sense that they would have to almost freeze a telescope just to be able to see into that realm. So, but there's a lot of places like Goldstone Observatory, which is on the 33rd, which is Earth to space communications. I'm doing the air quotes here, like who are we communicating with in space? So why is there a whole observatory where, you communicate with people in space? So, but yeah, man, the 33rd parallel is crazy because it touches on it's to me it's a ley line. And what a ley line is energetic, like natural earth energies that come up from the earth. And they come up from volcanoes, they come up from fault lines, they come up from springs. They come up through basically any crack that comes up to the surface. And that's important to note because um, I'll just start the journey from the Bermuda Triangle. That is on the 33rd parallel, right at the tip of the 33rd parallel.
Hmm.
And Bermuda Triangle is a volcanic seamount, right? It used to be a volcano that doesn't exist anymore. And what
Yeah.
I just say about the energies, they come up.
Come
There are
on.
there are these things called telluric currents, which are um, electric currents that come up from the earth, and they affect this is so it's essentially more energy. We live in electromagnetic, like a force field. The thing that keeps us together is electromagnetic energy, which is electric waves and magnetic waves that are flowing side by side. They're locked in together, right? It's like a Ziploc bag of our reality, or like if you look at the Ziploc, right, or a zipper or whatever you want to say. That's how I look at the fabric of our reality. And so it's electromagnetic energy. So if there's a higher electrical charge that's coming from somewhere, it's going to kind of jar that um the electromagnetic energy, right? It's going to kind of jar it around. It's almost like if you take a magnet and you put it on a hard drive, you're gonna mess that hard drive up, right? It's gonna like fry it, or it's gonna the magnet inside the hard drive is gonna kind of go crazy. So you'll basically the electric energy in there and the magnetic energy in there is gonna just basically just fry. So if you look at it from that perspective, like the currents that are coming out of these volcanoes and kind of flowing around the earth, and then the sun kind of bends, the magnetic energy from the sun fights with the magnetic energy of the earth, and it kind of coils these things up in certain areas. And at certain times of the day, these currents will flow across mountains and different places, um, along this ley line, which I look at it almost as like a circuit. You know what I mean? Like a circuit board. It almost feels like it's on purpose. But these currents, man, when they come out of these volcanic, from these volcanoes or from these fault lines or whatever. Charleston is a big fault line, and it's on the 33rd. Again, you'll see that all along Jackson, Mississippi. There's a volcano underneath the Capitol building, and these currents, man, when they flow, a lot of these like Native American, they call them spirit lines. Native Americans do, and the Native Americans, for example, have, and so does a lot of places in old Europe. They have their graveyards purposely buried. They have their loved ones purposely buried on ley lines, and those ley lines are so. Basically, they wanted to be able to communicate with their dead loved ones. They wanted their loved ones from the past to be able to, help their current families through information or whatever. So they would have access to these things through these energies that flow along the surface of the earth. So when these things kind of coil up, when the sun presses down on the earth magnetic field, and it allows these currents to kind of coil up around things. And to me, that's what pyramids are. Like, pyramids are made of limestone, and limestone conducts electricity. So these things kind of coil up around it, and they create little vortexes. And I think you can create these little vortexes, to be honest with you, with just like granite circles. You can create little stones, pick stones of granite and kind of make a little circle. And as long as you find the Earth's energies. You could put these things on there, and you can kind of create little like mini portals is what I think they are. Because what I was just saying is that electric energy will jar the electromagnetic field, which will kind of create this little gap in the electromagnetic field, which I call a portal. I mean, it's like a little gap in space and time, right? It's like this little window that things can come in and out of at the speed of light, and we would never know. So when these things come into our reality, man, they manipulate this energy, and they know this, and they manipulate the energy, and they can just buzz in and buzz out. They vibrate in and they vibrate out. I don't know if you've ever read the Guy Hotel memo from the Black Files from the UFO. Have you ever read those?
No,
Any
I
of
have
the
not.
document dumps from 2012?
No,
When
I
they do
haven't.
document dumps, by the way, man, it's all garbage. I know you don't never really get anything good, but occasionally we'll find some stuff that is like pretty interesting. And one of them was from this. There used to be a field agent in San Francisco in the 40s, named Guy Hotel, I believe it was, and he wrote a letter to Washington, and it was basically along the lines of talking about like this was July 8th, 1947. So this was right around the Roswell incident. And here's what he has to say about the this is from the round robin, the flying roll from San Diego, California, right? So this is what he has to say. Part of discs carry crews, others are under remote control. Their mission is peaceful. The visitors contemplate settling on this plane. These visitors are human-like, but much larger in size. They are not excarnate Earth people, but come from their own world. They do not come from any planet, as we use the word, but from an etheric planet which interpenetrates with our own and is not perceptible to us. The bodies of the visitors and the craft also automatically materialize on entering the vibratory rate of our dense matter. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. They come in, you can only vibrate into a lower reality. You can't vibrate into a higher reality because we can't physically vibrate into a higher reality, but they can slow their vibrations down in order to come into our world. And I think they can manipulate that matter pretty easily. And to me, that's what these things are. They are just for whatever reason they figured out, or however they figured out how to manipulate matter and vibrate and change the density of matter at will, and just come in and out of reality anytime they want. So, and they use these ley lines because um, again, there's higher than normal energies on these lines, and that's important to note. I mentioned I mentioned like Roswell, for example, in 1947 had a big incident, right? Bunch of crashes that happened there. Well, that's on the 33rd parallel. So you got Roswell, you got the Phoenix Lights, Phoenix, Arizona's on the 33rd parallel. You got I'll just like so the Travis Walton abduction, right?
Hmm.
It was in Sitgreaves National Forest, which was in Arizona on the 33rd parallel. You got the USS Nimitz video, the Tic Tac video that's, everybody talks about online. That's the 33rd parallel. The Battle of Los Angeles, obviously they call it the Great Air Raid, right?
Yeah.
It's where the famous image of all the US troops shooting at this with the lights pointing up in the sky, shooting at this thing in the sky that didn't move for like
Hmm.
hours. So but you got
Wasn't it
some of the
supposed to be
biggest.
just a balloon they claimed or something afterwards?
Yeah, well, they claimed it was Japan. They claimed it was like, enemy combatants coming into, because this was, I believe, right after Pearl Harbor. So
Yeah.
everybody was kind of on edge. But, there's all these big things that happen along the 33rd parallel that's like, man, that can't be a coincidence. It's on the same line. That's a little bizarre. So, I'm kind of skipping over some stuff, but like I said, the Bermuda Triangle, um, you got in Charleston, you got there's a fault line in Charleston, South Carolina, and it's also the home of the 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemasons, right? Which is like the Supreme Court for Freemasons, basically. And you got, man, go to Atlanta. I talk about Atlanta a lot because there's obviously a ton of famous things that happen in Georgia, right? The Georgia Guidestones, for example, were on a 33rd parallel.
And they got destroyed randomly.
Right, yeah. So there's obviously a ton of things that Shane Cashman talked about in his book, Tales of the Inverted World. There's a place called Washington, Georgia, which is on the 33rd. That's where he was. That's where he did, I think, a portion of his book on. Um, so again, if you keep going across, man, there's all these pyramids that cross the 33rd. There's like, Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas on the 33rd, underneath the 33rd overpass, right? So there's a bunch of things that tie into the history of this area that just can't be a coincidence anymore. I think Waco, Texas was, like 32.9 parallel. And I don't like to get like specific, like it's usually 33.0 to 33.9, which is what I consider the 33rd parallel. But really, if you kind of expand that line just a little bit, I mean, it ropes in some big places, including like Skinwalker Ranch, including like I said, Waco, Texas, and a bunch of other places. So I use it as just a marker, but it could be a much wider place than what our simple mathematics tell us, right?
Yeah.
So so it can be anything along that line. And then when you include things along the 31st to the 36th, I mean, it really covers a lot of pretty heavy hitting things in the world. So maybe including a lot of places in Mexico, for example. So
I'm not
uh,
familiar with like the parallels and everything. Like if you go south of the equator, do they start over or is
yes,
that?
they do. Yes, like there's a 33rd degree south, right? So they're may so I'm talking about the 33rd degree north of the equator.
Hmm.
So there's a 33rd degree south of the equator as well. And really, so if you even just look in that little window, I mean that covers a lot of that
Yeah.
covers a lot of ground from the 33rd south to the 33rd north. It covers a lot of ground. So it's pretty interesting, man, that there's always wars that start on the 33rd parallel, including Kabul, Afghanistan. You got Damascus, Syria. You got the Temple Mountain in Israel is on the 33rd, and like I mentioned, the Fallen Angels, Mount Hermon. You got I think it crosses right over Iran. What's the capital of Iran? I can't remember, but it crosses over Iran. It crosses over Pakistan, where Bin Laden was killed. I mean, dude, it crosses over like Mount Kailash, which is, you know, the Bhagavad. I mean, I can't ever say that word right, but basically, it's like where a lot of Hindus worship.
Hmm.
Because there's like a pyramid on Mount Kailash. There's a whole bunch of, I think it's called like some, man, I can't believe I'm missing, I can't remember the word, but it's like a paranormal superhighway, basically, Mount Kailash is. And so you really have a lot of really pretty big, you mentioned like Japan, the nuclear bombs were dropped in Japan on the 33rd. You got most of them were dropped in the United States as well. They were there's matter of fact, where I live now is in South Carolina, and 5 miles is from my house, there was an accidental nuclear bomb that dropped from an airplane in the 50s. And the Air Force claims it was an accident and all this stuff. It blew up, but it wasn't charged with a nuclear, it wasn't nuclear charged. So
Mm.
almost every nuclear bomb has been dropped on the 33rd, right? Including there was an accidental one that happened in Georgia as well. So if again what is it, the White Sand, I mean Los Alamos,
Los
right? The National
Alamos.
Lab, the White
Yeah.
Sands Proving Grounds, near Bingham, New Mexico. The first nuclear bomb test with the code name Trinity. Um, all these almost all these places are on the 33rd, and that is for a reason. It's because of the harmonics of the 33rd. It's an earth, like I said, it's the earth energy. So the harmonics of this specific area are perfect for blowing up a bomb. But it has to be blown up at a certain time of the day. It has to be, when the sun's harmonics line up with the earth's harmonics, that's when a nuclear bomb has to be dropped. And there's a lot of theories as to why they do that, or why they drop the bombs in certain areas at certain times and things like that. There's a guy named Bruce Cathy who was a New Zealand pilot who just in the 50s he started seeing these UFOs. He didn't think they were real, and he started making a connection, seeing that they were on the line. And he kind of became interested in that. He spent the rest of his life, 50 years, mapping out a grid where these things are being reported at. And he kind of came to the conclusion that there is a world grid that these things travel on. He thinks that they use the energies of the earth to travel, right? These UFOs. And that would make a lot of sense because by the way, if I'm all over the place, just stop me, man. Just let me know.
No, you're good. I've actually heard someone before, not on my show, but I've heard people talk about how they use the Earth's energy to power their crafts.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a famous one with the Alaska Black Pyramid in Alaska. There's a theory that that's what that does is powers these UFOs and stuff. But I think they just get they get motive power from the Earth, so they can just. And I don't know if you can see this, but I mean, you can see it, but your audience probably can't. But there is a this thing right here is floating in midair. This is levitating. It's a baseball card display and it's levitating. And what's happening is underneath it is electromagnetic energy that's shooting up at a permanent magnet. And it's literally hovering and playing and these things are called airtime air displays. If you want to see what one looks like, it's mind-blowing actually. It stays perfectly still in the same spot. And that's what I think these things do. When they vibrate into our reality, they use our Earth's energies to travel, right? And if you think about it, if they were setting off nuclear bombs in these areas, they were blowing up, in my opinion, they were blowing up the transportation system. They were basically blowing up the railroad for the UFOs or the superhighways for the UFOs. Because if you look at places like the Barringer crater in Arizona, the meteor crater is one of the biggest in the world. It's like perfectly circled, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, why is it so perfectly circled? Right? If something was coming in, an asteroid was coming in, or a meteor was coming in from outer space, at an angle at thousands of miles an hour or whatever, it's, allegedly coming in at.
It would have been blown like more out away in a directional pattern, not just straight in a
Right.
circle.
That's exactly right. It wouldn't be like this perfect circle. So his theory is that Bruce Cathy's theory was that there may have been a cataclysm which blew these things up, this transportation system up. And he thinks that they're repairing them, which I agree. I think they're repairing them as well, but I don't think that they were blown up by a cataclysm. I think they were blown up by our government with these nuclear bombs and stuff. So, because almost all of them are dropped on the 33rd parallel or on these big ley lines. And by the way, this 33rd parallel is not the only ley line in the world. There's a whole grid. It's just one of many. I just think it happens to be one of the biggest ones. It may be like a circuit board if we think of Earth as some kind of holographic reality software. This is just a big grid that we live on, a big circuit board. And so I think this just might be a big circuit. It's kind of how I look at it. But so anyways, man, my theory on it is the government is purposely blowing up these, and the reason I say that is because I came across a video. It was a UFO video from my hometown. I come across it on the National UFO Reporting Center website, there's an acronym with it. It's a .org website, but it's not a government website. The FAA will tell you to report UFOs on this website. So you can go through and you can read all these reports from thousands and thousands of people around the United States and the world. And so I just happened for fun, was looking at my hometown. I found this one UFO and it was like, it turned out to be directly over my mom and dad's house. And somebody at the head of our road that we lived on was filming it back towards their house. And when I asked about it, everybody's like, oh yeah, this kind of stuff, we see it all the time. So the guy who was recording the videos, he had to use night vision goggles to see these things because he had night vision goggles and he was just going out playing with them at night. And that's how he started seeing them. So he started recording some of these things with his phone. And he said that every time they were out, the U.S. military would come fly around and chase them off. So again, that's my theory is they're repairing these energy, this transportation highway, this highway we're going to call it for transportation. And then our military comes and chases them off again. So if you ask me, what they're doing is they're destroying this travel system for them. And that's my theory on it, man. Again, but the 33rd parallel connection is kind of crazy because it covers, I mean, pretty much everything you can think of, man. Like in terms of, you got Disneyland, for example, where there's allegedly a portal. You got, the Catalina Islands, which is alleged underground or underwater alien bases.
Yeah.
You got, again, Indian reservations, wildlife reserves, national forests, like countless of them, not only in the United States, but also overseas, across all these places that I'm talking about. So it's pretty interesting, man. Like I say, you got Kashmir, which is an energy vortex, where there's a bunch of stories about jinn and ghosts. You got like the Garden of Eden, which is, ancient Mesopotamia, which is Baghdad, is on the 33rd. Matter of fact, I think Saddam Hussein's palace, which I've been to, was 33 degrees north and 33 degrees west. So it was pretty interesting. That was right on that line. Um, again, man,
What
um,
what made you look into the 33rd like what led you to researching this? Like something had to have clicked to where you started to look into this thing.
yeah, I just kind of I'd heard the 33rd parallel before a long time ago, like in 2008, 2009. And I remember
Hmm.
looking it up and I didn't see anything. So just like everybody was like, it's probably nothing. But then I started once I started like getting into the paranormal stuff, I started seeing like again, I would go to that National UFO Reporting Center website and I would see all these places like in my hometown and around my area. That's where I live on the 30th. I grew up on the 33rd. So everything that I'm talking about now is directly happening in the national forest, which is where I live, where I grew up at. And so I started asking people like, have you ever seen? Come to find out, everybody comes up to me is whispering like, yeah, man, this happened to me before, and I saw this UFO or something when I was with my boyfriend one night, or or yeah, I see spirit, I see fairies all the time, or I saw Puckwudgie, or I've seen all these crazy things, man, all these cryptids, and you have heard Bigfoot. My grandma used to go out and where my mom lives now. She bought my grandma's house when they died, when her and my granddad died. But um, she used to go into the backyard and just hoot, do these little hoots in the woods. And she always joked. She said, "I'm talking to Bigfoot." Like she was joking that something was, but she was
Yeah.
telling the truth. But something was hooting back at her, like doing these grunts and stuff back at her. So
Hmm.
like everybody has stories, and
Yeah.
that kind of convinced me that something's going on. So I looked it up one day online, like just on Google Maps to see like I was just kind of browsing around and I saw 33 degrees and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So then I kind of started dragging the Google map across the earth and I started coming across like all these, big cities. Like they're straight across the 33rd, Atlanta and Birmingham and all these places are straight across the 33rd. It's kind of weird. Dallas and Phoenix and LA and all these places. And it's kind of weird because I started going, oh, something this is interesting. So I started looking at all these other places, and it's actually still growing. This list of what everything that's on the 33rd is still growing because people will email me and they'll go, "Yeah, this happens all the time where I live, or that happens, or there's pyramids here, or there's like petroglyphs there, or there's like." So people will reach out to me, which I love. I love hearing stories because I'm going to actually do a documentary about the 33rd parallel. I'm going to drive across and I'm going to film all these locations and really kind of paint a picture of what I'm talking about. Because talking about it is one thing, man, but actually seeing these things, on video or talking to people who've had experiences is a totally different thing. So again, that was kind of what it was, man. I started once I found out there was things happening locally at my house, like literally right above my house or the house that I grew up in, and then everybody I knew had experiences except for me. Um, it was interesting. So there's been a lot of things, man, just being in places over in Baghdad and places like that. There was like the biggest Freemason building I'd ever seen was in Baghdad, Iraq. And I couldn't believe him. There was a guy that was a Freemason with me because we were just driving around in Humvees and he was like, "Yeah, that's a big Freemason building." And it was. They had the compass on the front of it and everything. And it was just huge. And I just remember thinking, like, I've never heard that before. Like, but I was 25 years old, 26. So, and I'm 41 now. So back then I was just kind of like yeah, I don't, it's interesting, but I didn't really care. But once I started making the connection to the 33rd, then I started thinking like maybe God put me on the path to see all these things. Like I had been to the pyramids in Egypt. I have been to crazy places in the Middle East that nobody else has been, man, because of what I used to do for a living. I used to be in the military again. I used to travel a lot throughout the Middle East, and it would always put me in strange places, strange to see strange buildings. And I felt like that was on purpose. Like I used to be stationed in Turkey And we would go on like trips to go see like Darren Kuyu and places like that. And I feel like I was constantly being put in this place because my life makes no sense, dude. Like some of the things I've done in my life, I'm from a dirt road and a double wide trailer. Like, the experiences I've had in life makes no sense. Like, how did I get down that path and why? And so I just came to the conclusion later on in life that, I was put there on purpose for a reason to experience things, to be able to talk about these things to people, to spread information to people that may not have been able to see these things firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
So, because like when you look at the pyramids, it's unbelievable how freaking big these things are. It's unbelievable how big these stones are, and also you can see the water striations on it from where it looks like it'd been underwater for a while. So it's like clearly something about our past that they're hiding and they're not telling us about.
It
And
doesn't make a
and
lot of sense.
yeah, man, there's a lot of things, but once you get into that, again, once you get onto the paranormal side of once I got into the paranormal side of the 33rd parallel stuff and making the connections to like hidden history and all these things, then I started going, okay, why are they doing that? And then it became more clear that it seems to me like there's a lot of ritual sacrifice that's happening in the world still today. And they do this like they'll do these sacrifices these through war, right? Like for example, they have war started in Afghanistan and Iraq on the 33rd. Like that's their way of, like, in my opinion, worse, saying, giving praise to their god, to their demon god, whoever the hell that is, Baphomet or the devil or whatever you want to call him, Saturn, Kronos, whatever you call the devil god that they worship. The fallen angels, because the fallen angels, 33% fell on the 33rd at Mount Hermon. So like everything they have to do is in the name of 33, right? As if like this is to say, we did it for you, whoever they serve. So I'll give you an example. Um, Russia and Ukraine, right? There's the Russia and Ukraine war is going on. Lots of people die. The sacrifice is people dying. The way they present it to their God is they go, whoever their God is, by the way, again, they don't, my God is the God of love and light, and Christ is my savior. Like I don't know who it is they serve, but their way of saying, hey, this war was for you, to their God, is they want Ukraine to become the 33rd member of NATO. It's always a symbolism. There's always symbolism with what they're doing, right? Like I said, with Kennedy being assassinated on the 33rd parallel underneath the 33rd overpass. Like that's another one of those that they do it in the name of the F-33. It's always 33, by the way.
Who was the
33,000 emails, 33
yeah.
new whatever. I mean, it's over and over, dude. It's not,
Who
there
was
was
the 33rd president? I don't have Google up to look real quick.
yeah, like FDR was the 32nd president,
Okay.
but he did 2 terms, right? Or he did a full
Three.
term. He
He
did
did
3 terms, right?
He was
But I was saying he
for
did a full eight years, and
yeah.
then he did an additional 4. So symbolically, he was the 33rd president as well.
Yeah.
So, and he signed the Banking Act of 1933. He was the one who added on the back of the dollar underneath the pyramid. First of all, he added the pyramid to it, the all-seeing eye, in 1935. And what is listed underneath the pyramid? It says Novus Ordo Seclorum. I hope I didn't just cast a spell, but it says Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means new order for the ages, which means new world order, right? I mean, and FDR was a 33-degree Freemason. He was buried on the 33rd in Georgia. So there's a lot of symbolism there, man, that people don't really, like Jesus was 33, right? He died, he was crucified, you know, he performed 33 miracles in the Bible, had his transfiguration on the 33rd, born and crucified on the 33rd. The flower of life has 33 spheres. Ice freezes at 33, 33 vertebrae in the human body. There's a lot of connection with 9/11 where 33 appears a lot. Again, it's a sacrifice thing.
Mm-hmm.
There was 33 crew members in total that died in all the plane crashes. United Flight 93 had 33 passengers. Even the post 9/11 GI Bill is named Chapter 33. So there's always some kind of like connection there with the 33. And that's kind of how I see that they do it. It's like but they have to do it on ley lines, with these wars, because they're amplifying their message to their God. Like the bigger the amplification of that message, the better for them. But I think what they're doing is I think they're getting um, medicine and technology and stuff from these entities. And these entities are in return saying you have to sacrifice something for us. And I think that that's what is going on. I think that we're getting technology and all kind of stuff from these things still, but we have to give them something in return because, everything there has to be a sacrifice for everything. By the way, just before 9/11 in February 2001, the FCC asked Congress if the 33 gigahertz, they asked Congress for the 33 gigahertz space, Earth to space signal. It's the 33 gigahertz bandwidth, basically. And the FCC asked Congress if they can allot it for the Department of Defense in preparation for a big event that was going to happen. And 9/11 happened like 7 or 8 months later, something like that. So like they're clearly getting information about something. But this 33 gigahertz signal is specifically Earth to space communications. And that makes me ask the question, like, what is space? Is it up in the sky that we're looking at, or is it the space that I'm talking about that we can't see? Is it the electromagnetic spectrum space? So that's the interesting part to me is like, can they communicate with these things? And it appears that they can. And that's what they're doing there's always a tie to the 33, man. Even if you look on movies, I remember I was watching Top Gun and, the new one, the newer one, and Tom Cruise was shooting. He was flying his jet over the Middle East or wherever the hell they were. And he was shooting his ammo stopped at 33. It was like, they like put it in plain sight now, man. They don't even hide it anymore.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people don't talk about like how Atlanta is the new Hollywood and how Hollywood is the old Hollywood. But what are they both? They're both on the 33rd parallel. So they have to amplify their message on these ley lines to get us to believe in their reality. So they put the reality out there in the world, and if we believe it, if we accept it, then it becomes reality. So they can speak things that you can speak things into existence, right? And so that's what they're doing, man. They're casting spells on these ley lines. When they cast the spells, we have to believe it. That's the trick. We have to consent to it. If we don't consent to it, then they won't pursue it. But that's the only way. They have to get us to consent to everything. And that's why they try these false flag events. That's why they try all these things, because as long as they can get us to believe it's a real thing that's happening, they got us. And so they can manifest it into their reality. So when they do these things, like people always talk about predictive programming coming from Hollywood and stuff. I don't think it's predictive programming. I think it's literally manifestation. I think they're literally trying to get us to see, or try to get us to believe that these things are real, if that makes any sense. So, because it's all about consent, man. And we have to understand that it's not real if we don't consent to it. Like I stopped watching all kinds of news and everything just because I don't consent to any of the information anymore. You can tell me anything you want. I just don't believe it anymore. Right. I don't consent. I gave up. I watch baseball because it keeps me kind of, tethered to reality a little bit. Yeah. I need to have something, because I think otherwise people would lose their minds if they just talk conspiracy and aliens and shit all the time.
This is my grounding. As weird as it sounds, like the things that I talk to in here is what grounds me, because the normal routine of my life is so chaotic of everything going on. Like this is the one time where I feel like I can actually talk about things with people to where it's not the mundane. Not that my life's mundane, but you know what I mean? Like not the normal everyday grind. Like this is stuff that interests me and I like to hear about it. So this actually piques my interest and I look forward to it, is because it's something that I find interesting. But if I sit here all day long and did this as my normal life 24/7, then yeah, I would have to find something else. But like for me, this is almost my little outlet just to hear things, because I don't watch the news. I don't pay attention to what's going on. I don't believe 90% of the shit that they say on there, because it's all, like you said, kind of just, I don't believe it.
Yeah,
And
I don't either. It's all fake. I mean, I love talking to guys like you and being a part of this. What I feel, I guess I feel like I'm part of the community now a little bit, but just because I love the fact that, like, I remember, like, I was on like the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and Mark at the beginning was, I kept saying, I know it sounds weird. I know it's, and he's like, dude, this is weird. We're in the weird. We know.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like, okay, because I'm always talking to somebody like my family or friends or whoever, and they don't really get it.
Yeah.
They think that what I'm into is like my brother. I told him, I'm like, yeah, come, you gotta do this podcast with me. And he's like, yeah, I don't care. I don't care about anything. None of that interests me. I'm like, how can this not interest you, dude? This is like everything, you know? Like, what else is there? I don't get it. I mean, like I said, I watch baseball and I enjoy that, but what else could there be that really interests you other than this? If somebody told you that there was pyramids underneath the earth right here where we live, that wouldn't be interesting to you. I just don't get that part. But so it's good to vibe with people like you guys, like you and Mark, and I was on like Tony on the confessionals with Tony Merkel, and it's really good just to be a part of people who don't think you're crazy all the time, So
It's funny because I think majority of the people, when I post about, I made up two different Facebook accounts. I have my normal one, and then I started getting a lot of random people trying to add me. I was like, well, I've got my kids on there, I got my family on. Like, I don't want my normal life being out there for everyone to see. So I made up a second account, and it's just like I've been finding all these people for guests, and I've been finding all this other stuff, but like it's nice to be able to talk to other people because I think the majority of the people from my normal life think I'm insane. They think I'm crazy because of the stuff I talk about. So like it's nice to be able to find people to talk to that like I have something in common with. Like I think of stuff like this. I'm interested in stuff like this. I literally want to have a conversation with someone like this. I wanted to tell someone about what happened to me years ago and I never could because literally everyone thinks you're crazy. So it's
yeah.
like that's why I do the podcast because literally I wanted to talk to people that had experiences because I never felt like I could talk about what happened to me.
Well, people will have experiences and then they'll convince themselves that it didn't, you
Yeah,
know?
I did. That's 15 years. I said I wrote it off as had to be explainable, even though there's no way to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, even my mom knows I'm into this stuff. She called me one night and she goes, yeah, there was this thing that was like hovering in the backyard, but it was just probably a radio tower. I'm like, you lived there for 60 years and a radio tower just pops up in the middle of
Right.
the woods right behind your house, right? And she's trying to convince herself that it was anything other than what it could have been, and I just think that's interesting because I think what I really think it is, man, is I think we were given this responsibility by the universe, by God, whatever we want to say. And for whatever reason, we were allowed to see beyond the veil of something or experience something. Most of mine is not seeing, but feeling. Having crazy things happen to me all the time that I can't even possibly begin to explain. Crazy synchronicities just nonstop. And a synchronicity is something that happens, for those who don't know, something that happens and then another thing happens and it's like that's not a coincidence. Like I said, that was when my dog died and her name was Penny, and then my wife was reading a book that night and it said Penny was a good dog. Like, to me, that's not a coincidence. That can't be a coincidence. It has to be something else. And I think that we were given this responsibility because we were given like a set of goggles or whatever to see beyond the veil for some reason, And I I I think that it was intentional for guys like you to go out there and talk about the things you've seen to help others kind of wake up. Again, this is what my podcast is about, awakening or awakening, the awakening, and waking people up. But what I'm starting to realize is that you can't wake people up. It's a spiritual journey that everybody's on, and everybody is at different levels of that. And typically what happens when you get on a different level, when you vibrate on a higher level, is what I see. It's hard to tell people something is going on because they have to come to that knowledge on their own. You can plant seeds of information to them and they might come to that information later. They might connect the dots later, but you can't wake them up. There's no way to wake people up on their own. Like, it's like telling an alcoholic that he needs to stop drinking, when that alcoholic needs to come to that information on his own and that realization. He needs to hit rock bottom. He needs to see it himself. You can't convince an alcoholic to stop drinking. You can't just say, "Hey, you need to stop," and they're going to go, "Okay, yeah, I'll stop."
Yeah. Because you told me to, I'm going to quit right now. It
So
doesn't work
yeah,
that way.
yeah, it doesn't work that they have to come to the information on their own. So I just think that there are different versions of ourselves in this reality. And when you go to a different level, you have to you shed your skin in a way, and you kind of leave behind a portion of and typically, unfortunately, that happens a lot of times with losing loved ones and stuff like that. And but I always feel like when you have to shed a part of yourself, you have to get rid of a part of yourself in order to grow or experience new things. So for me, again, this is a spiritual awakening this is my personal spiritual awakening. And if people want to hear about it, then, I'm glad to talk about any of it. Like I said, man, and I'm interested in everything that has to do with that, with the vibrations of things, the frequency of things, the seeing God in the near death experiences and things like that. Because for me, that's what I want to know more about. I no longer watch college football. I used to love it, but I just can't watch it anymore just because I just feel like it's low energy stuff. And some people would say that about baseball, but again, I have to have something. Um, so yeah, man, there was, by the way, man, I didn't mention this. There was a lot of people born on the 33rd parallel that would blow your mind. Like Marilyn Monroe and Elvis and Hank Aaron and Johnny Cash and Bear Bryant and Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. and Helen Keller and Jim Henson and BB King and Oprah Winfrey,
Didn't
Kanye West, you name it, dude. This
didn't Martin
people,
Luther King get assassinated on the 33rd third too, or is that?
was he assassinated in Alabama? I think he was.
I
But
think it was.
he was born in Atlanta, and so was Kanye West, and Oprah was born in like Mississippi or somewhere like that. Most of these people, man, like even Hulk Hogan, Jesus was as well. Not to compare Jesus to any of those idiots, um, but for sure, there's something strange that on that line, man, greatness happens. And I'm not saying that just because you're born on that line, great, you'll be great. I think there's an opposite of that as well. I think that bad things can happen too, because in my hometown, I told this on Tony's show, but in other shows, I've lost four of my closest best friends since childhood growing up. I've lost four best friends, but that's not all. In my little hometown of about 1,500 people, in the surrounding communities and stuff, there's a few thousand more. I can probably count close to 1,000 people who have died that I know, and that's very atypical, man. Because when I was in the military, I didn't lose that many friends. I don't think I lost but one in the military, and but back home, I was ex-girlfriends, like three ex-girlfriends have been killed in car accidents. Four of my best friends, tons of family members, and other guys and girls I grew up with. Just it's weird, man. There's a heavy energy that I think that affects people in different ways in these areas. And I think where I grew up was one of those. And I think because of where I grew up, by the way, my brother's house is on the 33.333 parallel. His house also has like ghost activity in there all the time. He's in the shower. It typically happens in his bathroom for some reason. He's in the shower all the time and hears voices. One time, this something jerked the curtains open on him at 4 o'clock in the morning when his family was sleeping. And so this just weird things that happen, man. And again, he's in the middle of the national forest, but a lot of
I'll
heavy
I'll talk to
energy
you about
stuff.
that in here after we get off the air.
Sure, man. A lot of heavy energy stuff, dude. I mentioned the Pukwudgie, a lot of it shouldn't be a surprise that there's a lot of springs in that national forest as well. And my
Hmm.
brothers, there's countless stories of growing up about like ghost lights and stuff like that, which are basically fairies, or people call them fairies, or we know them
Bay
in the
folk.
UFO world as in the Bigfoot and UFO world actually as you know these little orbs of light that turn into cryptids or whatever. A lot of people who have had these sightings, excuse me, a lot of people who have had these sightings have said the same things. Let me get a
Yeah,
drink of water real quick, man. I'm sorry.
you're good. Now, when you mentioned your brother's house or whatever in the bathroom, it's like a water source. And what I was going to say, I didn't want to interrupt you or whatever, but like the weird stuff that goes on in my house typically happens in my daughter's room, and right under her room is where our well tank is. And for some reason, in her room, it's the only room in the house, the very corner, when it gets really cold out, it gets condensation in the very corner of the ceiling. But I've had people go up there, and there's never been anything wet in the attic or on like the actual insulation. And none of that's wet, but for some reason, it condensates right in the corner of her room. And all of the weird stuff that's ever happened in this house all seems to resonate from her room. I don't,
Always, it's always water spot. It's
yeah.
like always water underneath the,
Yeah.
you can take dowsing rods and you can go find water, right? You know what dowsing rods are?
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry if you do. I don't mean to insult you, but a lot of times people don't know what that is, but that's basically like copper wires that you can just hold. You can hold them still and you can walk around in the woods. And then when these things cross, that means that there's a flow of energy somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it can either be underneath the earth. It could be, a lot of people use it to find like dead bodies in the woods. A lot of people use it to find water. They still use, a lot of people who work in the water business use
Yeah.
dowsing rods to find water currently. But a lot of people also used to use them and still use them to track animals. You can get the the wake, the energetic wake of an animal, even down to the rabbits, just by using dowsing rods. So there's something to be said about energy because, I mean, water, because again, how is electricity made typically from from these turbines and stuff is a flow of water flows down on a turbine, and the turbine creates, spins the electromagnetic or the electromagnet, and it creates electricity. So if these things are using electricity to vibrate into our reality, then of course they can kind of ride these electric waves because they are electric. These beings are electric just like we are. And they can affect these electric currents can affect us too. I mean, that's why people have like weird time slips and things like that, where they're like, oh, wait a minute, wasn't it just here? Or it's because we're electromagnetic energy. Everything is electric in this world. Everything, water, the desk in front of us, the microphones, that you're looking at in the universe has an electric energy or electromagnetic radiation. So some are just denser than others. And again, that's why when water typically the flow of water is always going to be some kind of, you know, ghost activity or UFO activity or Bigfoot activity or what have you, because I think that these things come into our reality through these little portals, because just like I mentioned earlier, it kind of jars the electromagnetic energy fields that are kind of zip locking this world together.
Yeah. And
So very
I've
interesting.
always kind of been looking into things here and there ever since I had stuff going on. And it seems like in the last 4 or 5 years, heard a lot more interdimensional. And I've heard a lot more with frequencies and vibrations and how we're all just frequencies, electromagnetic, we vibrated is different. A lot of the stuff seems to be more relevant today than it used to be back in the old days. And I don't know if that's because we've smartened up, or to be 100% honest, I think it's, and I'm not taking credit for this because I'm not doing anything here original, but I think literally what we're doing right now is what's helping wake people up. Like your bio, the Awaken podcast. People are talking about it. People are listening to it. They're coming around to the idea. So the more and more ideas are being fed. And I've heard people criticizing other podcasts because they said we're spreading these false narratives and putting these ideas in people's brains. I'm like, I can't prove it one way or the other that what we're talking about is 100% accurate. It makes sense to me. It makes sense to you. It might not make sense to someone else, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. You know what I mean? Like if someone come on here and
Yeah.
told me something completely different, I don't have a way of saying it's right or wrong. It's
Yeah, well, I mean, you're just a smart, critical thinking person. I don't have to necessarily be right or wrong about it. I feel like at least we're getting closer to something, right?
mhm,
Even if it's a little fragment of truth to, I think there's so much lies and hate and evil coming through broadcast channels through whether it be radio or TV or movies or whatever medium they're using to put out this frequency, this negative, bad frequency. That's their resonant frequency, and every resonant frequency has a dissonant frequency. So if we're putting out, and this is why they want to control the information. This is why they want to cut off the airwaves. This is why they want to ban us from different, platforms and what have you, is because we are, they can't stop it though, but what we're doing is we're putting out a dissonant frequency to their frequency, and it's shattering theirs. It's like, and what that means is like, I'll give an example of that. If you're riding in the car with somebody and then your favorite song's on the radio and you're trying to vibe to it, and then the person in the car is just singing all the words wrong and stuff, that's a dissonant frequency. So we're literally altering their wavelength, their bandwidth right now. We're affecting them, and they don't know how to stop it, because not only are we talking about stuff like this on the airwaves, we're also talking about this in person, and people can see it, and people, it's becoming more of a conversation. Unfortunately, there were some events that happened in recent years that woke a lot of people up at the same time for them, unfortunately, because it got people talking. It got people unafraid. It got people from church talking more about Nephilim and different things. Whereas I never heard that before. My whole life, I'm 41, went to church my whole life, and I never heard any preacher ever talk about Nephilim. But now everybody's talking about Nephilim, and it's interesting, man, that like again, they can't stop it. It's just something it's going to happen. They're going to try to continue to do everything they can to prevent us from talking about this stuff, but eventually they're going to try to look like the saviors and go, oh, they're going to try to disclose something to us to make it look like, oh, we've just been doing this for you're going good or whatever. But
there's never been any intentions of helping us, people like me and you, or normal everyday people. Like, they don't give two craps about any of us. It's all about them. And everyone's like, who's them? Who are they? I mean, we all pretty much kind of know who the elusive they are. Like, it's not you or me.
100%. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's people who have, in my opinion, whoever they are. I think again, we know who some of they are, but it's people who have more information than us, and it's an information war for real. It's it's easy for the masses to think that, like there's 27 hours in the biological cycles of every being. There's 27 hours, but we have a 24-hour day. And why is that? That doesn't make any sense. So it's like they, as long as they control the information, they control the books, they control every form of medium, then they can control us. Because we just have to believe whatever they say. But again, once you just say, I don't care about any of the crap they're feeding me, I don't believe it anymore, then they've lost their power. And we started looking to each other for answers. And it's got to be to them the worst thing that can possibly happen. People are talking to each other. It's like the slaves are talking to each other. They're waking up a little bit. What are we going to do? So
I do wonder, because I mentioned this earlier, I've already experienced my issues with certain YouTube, and at what point is it going to get to where they start listening in and start trying to determine, oh, you can't be on this platform now, things you're talking about, like you're being one of my friends actually mentioned something about when I don't want to talk about it on air, but when I got this thing where I'm now a part of, they're like, oh, because you're now part of this big thing, you're going to have to answer to the advertisers and everything else because they don't want you talking about certain things. You might scare people away. So I never thought about it, but I was like, I wonder if that is something that might happen eventually, because money controls the world. And if I'm working or doing something for a business, that they want the money. So is the topics that I talk about going to deter people away from their business? So at what point they're going to start trying to censor that? Because I think there's a lot of censorship going on everywhere. So at what point are they going to start cracking down on podcasts for censorship? They already do it on YouTube. at what point is the rest of these things going to hop on the bandwagon of doing it too? Because when they realize that they can do that, there is no free speech.
Well, you mentioned speech, right? They call
Hmm.
this thing hate speech now.
Yeah.
They have to try to they have to get you to believe that hate speech is a real thing. And it's not. We have freedom of speech. So hate speech doesn't exist. It's a fake made up thing. But people have started to believe that this is a thing, but it's not actually written into law. There's no, you know, they can't convince everybody to believe that hate speech is a real thing. But they can control us by they can't control me, man. When you get off the matrix kind of thing, when you and I hate to say that because that sounds goofy and like, everybody says it now, but when you break free of the plantation and you decide, no, you're not my boss anymore. I don't care what you got to say. And I did that in the form of like I started my own business. I couldn't listen to anybody anymore. I couldn't listen to people who were not as smart as me telling me what to do. And once I took my power back there, I started taking my power back everywhere. And so even in my own business now, I'll have meetings with CEOs and stuff, and they'll try to bully me into something. And I go, yeah, you can stick it up your ass, dude, because you don't own me. I'm done. Like I am my own man. There's nothing that you can do or anybody can do to, even if they took everything down, if they took all my website down and podcasting and anything else, okay, you're not going to stop me. You're not going to stop me. I'm still going to live my truth, and I don't care what you have to say about anything. You can tell me so and so's in power or so and so's the president now. Okay, I don't, whatever. They're not my president. They're not my king. They're not my, HOA community organizing ruler, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like you can have a HOA, but that's not my boss. My boss is me. My boss is God. Like that's the only person I answer to is God. So like, and it's the same thing as like I mentioned church a couple of times. I do go to church, but I look at church more as like to get information and to also help give my kids a base because I like the community aspect of church. But to go through a preacher or to go through a pastor or a clergyman or whoever, the Pope or whoever to get to God is not happening. Like it's a straight relationship with God that I have, and I can look inward at any time and talk to God. So yeah, man, it's just once you become free-minded, then there's the possibilities are endless. I know a lot of people lean on podcasting to pay their bills and stuff, but for me, it's just a way of getting good information out. It's not about making money for me, at least not right now. I mean, maybe one day, but most of the money I make now, I give to like church or whoever, whatever I can. I don't spend it for my own benefit in any way, but.
I struggled with the whole monetization of this podcast because it was never what I wanted to do. I don't like making
Yeah.
money off of someone else's experience. Someone says, "Oh, you're just taking everyone's stuff and making money from it." I was like, "You know how much I spend a month? I was spending almost $100 a month to do this podcast out of my own pocket, and I did it for over a year out of my own pocket. Like I wasn't making anything." And finally, I talked with a couple of people, and they're like, "Look at it as," because I used to do band stuff. Like, did you ever go play shows for free? I was like, you know how many times I played in a metal band, how many times I didn't get paid? So I don't have that mentality. And they're like, yeah, but you didn't, it's regardless of how I view it, you're creating something. You're making a form of content and you're basically just recouping what you're putting into it. So I kind of leaned there and I was like, okay, well, as long as I'm recouping something to what I'm investing in and breaking even or whatever, then that's fine.
Yeah, and
I,
my payment is, man, is I swear to God it is talking to guys like you and just vibing with people. I went to like a comedy show in Florida and there was like 10 or 15 conspiracy and paranormal podcasters there. And man, it was just such the coolest thing because everybody was so awesome. And it just, because I've always felt my whole life like I didn't belong to some kind of a crew or like
yeah,
I don't get along. I get along with people fine, but I don't have like close friends like that. Like I don't, I don't know. I don't make friends
it
easy because I'm like,
it's
they
hard
don't
to
think
find
this,
people with the same common interest.
yeah, they don't think like me. So all I'm doing the whole time is explaining how I am and who I am and they're like, yeah, I don't really get it. So to be around like-minded people is always awesome, man. And I think that's what it's all about is just vibing with people, getting everybody on the same vibration. That's what vibing is. You know, when you play music for free, you were probably just enjoying the hell out of it, man, because
Hmm.
you were doing what you wanted to do and it was fun. And whether you made money or not is, I guess, irrelevant because you were doing what you love and you were vibing with people. And I think that's why a lot of celebrities, like musicians, they probably stumble into money and they're like, I don't know how to deal with this. You know, like
Yeah.
that seems to be the case because they really enjoyed making music. And now it's a corporate thing. And, you know, so
Yeah.
I don't really care to make money, man. But it's cool to make money and everything, but I don't really, I'm not going to be out there, you know, asking people for money for this or that. If they want to support me in some way, they can, you know.
I made a Patreon and I literally put it as low as I could just because I gave everyone early access with no ads because I felt guilty having ads on my show.
Hmm.
And it's like $1.99 a month. And once Patreon, and then they take their fee for. I don't even make a dollar. I was like, I'm not trying to make money. It's literally I'm giving you all the episodes way early with no ads
I
and
think,
extras like these videos, like the where we're talking about. I'll throw it up on there for them to watch if they want to watch the video on Patreon. Like literally, I'm just. It's not about money for me. And I have no, like I said, I didn't have the interest in it, but now with what I'm doing, I have no say in the matter when it comes to the random dynamic ads that get inserted in there. It's literally part of the thing that I can't control.
well, I think it's about like if you have an abundance of anything, man, if you have an abundance of time or a voice to speak to someone or ear to listen to someone, I think that's what it's all about. I think it's all about love in the universe, to be honest with you. I think we're here. Most people who have near-death experiences will tell you that when they die, they meet God and they do a life review with God. I've heard thousands of these on YouTube and other places, by the way, podcasts and stuff. And everybody says the same thing. God will ask them, well, did you learn how to love? That's always the question. Did you learn how to love? He doesn't care about anything else. He just wants to know if you learned how to love. And so for me, it's all about giving stuff away. And then every time you give something away, man, it comes back to you 10 times. It really does. It's the model of abundance, the law of abundance, whatever you want to call it. When you give stuff away, dude, it always comes back. So if you're giving
Hmm.
away stuff for free, man, you know, God's going to bless you whether you want it or not in
Yeah.
some way. He'll give you more money at your job or, you know, something, but it'll come back to you in some way. And even if you don't want anything, you're like, I'm doing this because I love this person, I want to take care of that person or whatever. Just out of the kindness of your heart, it's pretty important that to note that God will make sure you get rewarded for that because everything is a balance in this world. There's a yin and yang. If you're out of balance, then you know whether it's too much good, God's gonna give you a bad. If too much bad, God will give you good. You know, so
I just, for me, and I've said this recently, like I made this for selfish reasons, not in the sense of profiting, but like I wanted to have other people talk to me about the stuff that they went through because then I could relate to it.
yeah.
And I was like, it helps me. And if it's helping that person, it's like mutually beneficial for both of us. But like, I wanted to talk to people that had the same sort of experiences because it felt like I couldn't talk about it. So I didn't want people to feel like they couldn't talk about it. So I wanted to give them a place to talk about it. And I thought maybe, well, I enjoyed doing it and I felt better about it. I still didn't even talk about whatever happened to me for over a year because it wasn't, this is not what my show's about. It's about everyone else. And it's like, I went on other people's shows and talked about it, but I don't, this is not my way of, I don't know how to use the word what I'm looking for, but like, this is not my way of making it about myself. Like, to me, I'm trying to help other people. And I don't know if that resonates with some people, but like, I'm literally here just for someone to come on here and talk about things that maybe they couldn't talk about with somebody else. And if that helps people, that helps me. I don't know.
Usually, man, what I've noticed is what did I say earlier about the low vibration? When you're in a
Hmm.
state of fear and you're vibrating low, right? Um, a lot of times, people who have had trauma in life, people who have been abused, or you know, maybe they've lost loved ones, or there's some kind of trauma in their life in some way that doesn't necessarily mean sexually abused or anything. If there's some kind of trauma that they're holding on to, it usually keeps them in a low vibratory state. And when people are in a low vibratory state, these things attach to themselves to them. You can kind of the veil is a little more thin. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and most of the time, I mean, most of the people you talk to, I would bet have had some kind of trauma in their life. I talked about losing four best friends. I would imagine a lot of people have gone through something pretty heavy, and a lot of people who experience these things. So it's important to note that um you're almost like a therapist in a way when you talk to these people, and they're therapists for you as well.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you specifically went through any kind of trauma, but for somebody else, they may have, and if you think about retrocausality, when someone goes to see a psychotherapist, that's what they do. The psychotherapist will do like you do, and you'll be like, take me through that moment. Tell me what it smelled like. Tell me what it felt like. How did you feel when this thing approached you? You're almost like a therapist in a way. And what you're doing is you're taking someone with retrocausality, you're putting them back in that time where this thing happened. And when they're there in that time, you can plant a new seed of like something positive, right? Or something that where you can go, okay, when you're here, maybe this happened for a reason, right? Instead of having them think something negative always happened, like, oh, why did this happen to me? Instead of thinking like that, maybe they can think now, why did this happen for me? Or why did God show me this? That kind of thing. So I think it's interesting, man, that you have a role of therapist and communicator and, friend and everything. It's a pretty important role. So, and it's a big responsibility in a way because you have to be sensitive to how people feel about things. You don't want to scare them away or make them feel more alienated about something that they already feel alienated
Yeah.
about. So
I feel
that's
like
a pretty important role.
for me, I can't relate to everyone because I didn't have anything traumatic in the sense that a lot of people have this. Like I said, whatever happened to me didn't affect me. I'm a skeptic, and here I am doing a podcast because I'm no longer a skeptic. So, like, it clearly had an effect on me, but it wasn't into the sense of like I didn't, I couldn't cope with it. I didn't go into depression. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't affect me in that
Yeah.
type of negative way, but it opened me up to the possibility that I don't know anything about what I thought I knew about. And like I said, not being able to talk about it bothered me because no matter what I talked about, it wouldn't matter to people because they're just gonna look at you like you're insane because it doesn't make any sense. And even today, it doesn't make sense to me. But that's where I struggle with for the most part is knowing that no matter what I do now, I'm I'm never going to be able to know what really happened. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's where it bothers me in that sense. But being able to help other people, if I'm actually helping, I want to think I feel like I kind of am sometimes. But to me, it's just that's all I'm trying to do. I'm just here to give people a place to talk and trying to help people.
It's important to note that, people aren't going to relate to everything, that you go through. When I was in the military, I did things that if I told my friends back home I grew up with some of these stories, it sounds so fantastical that, you know, nobody can possibly relate to. Nobody can relate to, I can't talk about some of the things I did, but like,
No, you're fine.
some of the places I've been, like nobody can relate to the pyramids, for example, seeing the pyramids because not a lot of people have been there. Um, it's just interesting that, we have these unique things that happen to us specifically that for whatever reason, it was something that we were supposed to learn specifically, we were supposed to see specifically
Mm-hmm.
because you can't share that time with anybody else. Even people in the military still don't know what I went through because my experience was unique to me. Which again, this is why I always say it always goes back to God for me. It always goes back to spirituality because it just makes the most sense. It just makes the most sense that we are on a spiritual journey individually, and we're all here to learn something. So
Someone told me, and then you can relate with you too, but because you do similar things. Someone said we were meant to have whatever happened to us put us on this path because we were doing what we're supposed to be doing. And we're supposed to be on this path to let other people also be able to come on here and talk about their stuff. They needed that. So we had to have that experience to put us on the pathway we are now. So they use the term we're doing the Lord's work, and I don't know if I'm not I'm not a religious person, so I don't want to say that's what I'm doing, but that is what they claim that we were like people like us are doing. We're doing the Lord's work because we're helping people.
I think that's
So,
true. I really do. And again, man, I hate to make people feel uncomfortable. If you don't believe in God, I wish that people would. I wish that people would find Christ because it's weird to even talk about, man, because I'm not really an overly religious person. But I mean, when typically people who talk about God and Christ is the Bible thumpers, right? It's the people your whole life that's your aunt that is super religious or your uncle or
my whole
whoever.
family.
Yeah, it's like there's always somebody in your family that's super religious, and I'm not like that. It's like a I don't know, man.
I grew up going to a Pentecostal church, so
Oh,
I
really? So yeah,
yeah
you've had them.
I know the whole lifestyle of it, and my family still are that way and everything. And I'm not against religion at all, but like
Yeah.
I don't go to church. I have my own beliefs, and like that's good enough
Well,
for me.
somebody reached out to me after I was on Tinfoil Hat with Sam Tripoli, and I told a story on there that happened to me, and a lady reached out and she said that she wanted to know more about it because what the person I was describing sounded a lot like her dad, and her dad had just passed away, and um we both kind of came to the conclusion after talking back and forth on emails that maybe I was supposed to deliver her a message specifically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As weird as that sounds, and even if it's not true, it the how it made her feel is important to me, you know?
Hmm.
So even if it's not true, it matters to me and it mattered to her because she still may be grieving, over her, and it sounds like she might be over her dad. And so if I helped her let go of something with something I said, I just felt like I was being used as a vessel by God. And again, I'm not overly religious, man. That's the weird thing about it is, I've never read the Bible front to back. I've always just read passages and different scripture and things, depending on certain situations. Like I just mentioned, being a vessel, that actually talks about that a lot there in the Bible. Isaiah 42:6 and 7 talks about that specifically. So it's weird. So if my wife heard this podcast and she heard me talking like this, she'd be like, "Who are you?" I mean, like that's the weird thing about it.
Yeah.
And that's how I know that I'm being used by God to do the Lord's work. I really think that. And so, and as long as you have good in your heart, you have God in your heart, right? So as long as you care about others, and it sounds like you do, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter if you proclaim it, but it matters to me that more or less be a good person. And as long as you live for others, then I think you're doing God's work. So no matter how you think about it or not.
I have my own. I don't dabble into the religious aspects of my own personal beliefs. I believe that there is a creator, and I believe there's a higher power.
Yeah.
But I don't like to try and alienate people like, oh, he's this way, he's this minded, like whatever. No, I
Yeah.
have like I believe in what you want to believe. I am not here to try and prove or disprove anyone or argue religion or politics or anything like that. I'm literally just here to talk with people,
Mhm.
and my beliefs have no impact on my opinions on anybody else.
Mhm.
Like I try and keep all that stuff out of it just because when people want to argue science, this is what I've always said. I could argue to disprove religion or prove religion if I wanted to, but like when you want to say that there is no God, you're here from a Big Bang. Well, what created the Big Bang? Well, gases. Well, where'd the gases come? There's always a question. There's never a definitive answer. And then they're like, well, what created the gases? Well, what created God? I was like, I don't have that answer either. Like, I'm not, you're never going to know.
Mhm.
I don't think we're supposed to know,
I don't think so either.
but you can argue it one way or the other with people. And like you've mentioned fallen angels. And this is where I've, with the Bible thumper type peoples that get it under my skin sometimes. Like, if God knew everything and God created everything, he created the angels and the angels rebelled. Theoretically, God knew that that was going to happen because they say God knows everything before it happens. So God also knew what he was doing was going to happen. So then it brings up the question of why did he let it happen? Why did he create it just for it to happen? It's one of those paradox type questions like you don't really get you can't think about it. We're not, our brains can't process this, and I don't think we're supposed to. But like, I
Well,
was
a lot.
always, I was always taught that with religion, like, and the way God is, God knows everything. We have free will, but He's going to know what you're going to do. But He knows He allows you to do it because that's your free will. It's like it almost contradicts it to an extent. Like He knows you're going to do this anyways.
That's
But
why
it's not
that,
predetermined, but like it still sounds like it is, and it's like that's where I struggle with it.
yeah, I struggle there too, man. In fact, like I'll read stuff in the Bible and I'll ask my wife, who's read the Bible a few times, I'm like, what does that mean? Like it'll say like God, and then God said, let us create man in our image. And it's like, what does us and our mean? And
Hmm.
then they have well, it's the Trinity and it's this. And I'm like, I don't necessarily believe that. I don't, because it didn't say the Trinity. It said God created us in our image, meaning there were other entities or gods or whatever. And then there's some other later on in the Bible, there's some other passages about like in Psalms, I believe, about like God is having counsel with other gods. The other gods are the lowercase g. He's the God
Hmm.
above gods. And so when you bring those questions up, people are just to watch them fumble around with it. The super religious people, and because they want an explanation for everything, and I don't think everything can be really explained because we don't know anything. We're just reading words from
If you
other men. That
if
yeah,
you look at the Old Testament God to the New Testament God, it's a different type of God. Like the Old Testament God was fire and brimstone coming to
right.
level out everyone, wipe you out, sending floods. The New Testament God didn't seem that way. He was a lot more lovable, tolerant. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's
I mean,
it's
of course,
strange. Like
yeah. Where there was a god that flooded the earth and killed everything, and and then
yeah,
there's this beautiful, loving, and I don't know, man. Those are the things I struggle with as well. I think a lot of people who are just inquisitive struggle with those questions as well.
and
There's a lot.
that's why I like I said I don't say I'm a certain type of religion because I have so
Yeah,
many questions. Like I believe there is a higher power. I believe if you're a good person, you do good in the world.
yeah. That's why I use the word spirituality instead of
Yeah.
religion a lot of times because it's a spiritual thing for me. It's not a, I when I go to church, it's a Christian church, but it's not like specific to all of I don't adhere to everything in the Bible. I don't look at it as some things are set in stone. That's how it has to be. But man, it's pretty accurate about a lot of things in our lives. You know what I mean? So regardless of the little, I don't get hung up on the little details of things too much anymore. I used to, but now I just look at what's the message? What is the underlying message here that they're trying to convey? And usually it's some positive message. It's not always a bad message. So
And to be a good person, I think is the best
yeah,
thing that you can take away from any type of religion or whatever. For
yes.
well, I say any, but obviously there's some pretty evil religions out there.
Yeah,
But
of course.
any good religion, like you basically the concept is just be a good person. Be good to other people. Don't be a piece of shit. I mean, that's
Yeah. That's all it's about, man. Just loving each other.
yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
man. Hopefully I answered all your questions on the 33rd. I like to skip around too much, dude. And
it's all
because
good.
in my mind it's like a web of things. It's always hard to because I can jump from one topic to the next pretty quickly when I start talking about one thing. I can go down the path of another thing. So I hope I didn't jump around for your audience too much. I'm sure I did, and I'm sure because everything I've been on so far, they're like, you started talking about a 33rd parallel like an hour and a half in just to get to the point.
It
So
happens. It's
yeah,
like I said, my show is literally free conversations, and half the time I don't even converse with people unless it's like towards the end. I let them speak without trying to interrupt here and there, just because I've realized there's other podcasts that I've listened to, and it seems like the host wants to do all the talking. I was like, that's not my mentality. If anyone knows me outside of this podcast, I'm a very quiet, reserved person. I'm very observant. I sit back in the corner and I don't want to sound like a creep, but like I sit back and I let everyone else talk and I'm just more observing what's going on around the room because that's just how I've always been.
Yeah, for those who listen to my podcast, you will see that I talk a lot whenever I interview because, and it's not because I'm trying to purposely interrupt. It is literally just me being so excited that there are other
Mhm.
people who think like me. It's like I'm just like, ah, yeah, dude, and it's like this and that. And so like if you listen, please be kind to me. I know I'm talking over people. I realize people are letting me know to stop talking so much and just let the people,
Have you
other
been getting
people
hateful
talk.
comments?
Yeah, some, man. Most of it's good, but I do get some, and it affects me, and I try not to let it affect me. Because I want to make a good product for somebody. I'm not trying to,
I
step on anybody's toes or
I got
anything.
told the other day that I am an occultist and I am messing around with stuff I don't know and I am the reason bad things happen and but it's
Uh,
all good for me to be famous, right? I was like, I'm famous? Like,
yeah, dude, I don't even
I'm an
my
occultist?
mentality.
How does apparently doing a podcast and talking to people has made me an occultist and apparently I'm famous. I was like, oh, all right. Like,
I promise I'm not doing this for me. So I am not trying to be famous at all. I want total anonymity with everything I do in life. I
for the
mean, but
listener out there,
it's just
like
kind of thrust me into it. But,
I didn't even want to be on camera. I don't like being on camera.
yeah,
Like, so
no,
I'm not trying to be famous. I told him earlier before we started, like, you don't have to be on camera.
yeah. You want to
Like,
be, you got a beautiful voice, by the way. It's nice and, you know, deep. I wish I had a nice voice like that. I got a
someone told me that I have a
nasally
radio
voice.
voice.
You do. Yeah, it's nice.
I was like, I don't know what a radio voice is, but it's
But
a
you don't have a radio face. So like you have to be super, like 350 pounds to be a radio guy.
no.
So you don't
I
have a
said I've
radio.
got the face for radio. No one sees it.
Nah, dude, you good. But
No.
yeah, it's a good voice, man. So like you should talk more. I'd love to talk to you about your stories anytime you want because I just like talking. So like if you were like, hey dude, you want to just chat for a minute and I'll tell you, I'm like, yeah, we don't have to record at all. I just want to talk. I
Yeah,
just want to hear the stories, dude. It's cool.
yeah.
It's like my own little it's my own little entertainment style of, I don't have to go to A&E or history or whatever, ancient aliens or anything. I can just listen to some cool stuff that happened to real people and it's not
I can
produced and it's not like,
I can send you a link to a recent episode I was on for someone else's podcast, or sometime if you want me to come on your podcast, I can come on there and talk about it too.
yeah, dude, I'd love that, man. That sounds awesome.
There's a lot of my experience is very strange. I'll give you the rundown off air about what it is.
Sure.
But well, everyone out there listening, I want to say thanks to Brad for coming on here, but I want him to one more time tell you where you can find his podcast at.
Yeah, you can find me at theawakenedpodcast.com. And if you want to be on my show, I will talk to anybody. Okay. So if you want to be on my show, send me, and you live on the 33rd parallel, or and the best way to do that is go to Google Maps, type in your city, and then right click, and a little pin drop will come up and it'll show you a marker. Okay. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the 33rd parallel. If you have some cool energetic frequency vibrations, most of the times when UFOs come or whatever, there's all kind of radiation, vibration, all these things that I want to hear all about it. I want to hear because the more information I get, the more it helps me along my journey of learning more about all of this stuff and learning about the 33rd. So if you have crazy stories about paranormal things that happened, hidden history, maybe you found this weird old rock in the woods behind your house or something, and you want to talk about that, I'd love to hear about that because hidden history is a big part of, they're concealing the truth from us. So I want to hear from you about that. If you have near-death experiences or bad, DMT trips or whatever it is, hit me up because I love hearing all that stuff. And you can find me at theawakenedpodcast.com, and you can contact me at theawakenedpodcast.com/contact. And if you want to support the show, you don't have to follow me or anything like that. I did make some t-shirts, which I'm wearing one right now. It's the 33rd parallel. It's a logo I made. And um, if you want to buy some t-shirts, like I have some awakened merchandise in there and stuff too. So it's not specific to the 33rd parallel. I will use that money to help keep the doors open to my hometown church, which is where my dad was baptized, my mom was baptized, me and my brothers were baptized, and it's probably where my kids will be baptized. So they're struggling to keep the doors open because a lot of people are going to these big mega churches. So any dollar I get, it's going straight to them for now, and then maybe some I'll use in the future to help support a 33rd parallel documentary. So look for that soon. So,
Awesome.
and you can find me on Spotify and Rumble and Instagram. On that, that's pretty much all I'm on. And I'm at the Awaken Podcast 33 on most of those platforms. So
Awesome. I'll make sure to include whatever information you want in the show notes too for anyone out there listening. They just go there and click on it. But,
cool, man.
well,
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, dude. It really means a lot that you'd take the time to listen to some backwoods idiot talk about shit. So
it's all good. I would say I'm backwoods, but I don't really live in the backwoods. I am an idiot though, so there's that. But no, I appreciate you coming on here and talking with me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, man. Thanks again for having me.
Yep. You have a good night.
You too.
Remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.